Saints fans and who-dats from all over the world. It's time for the Bayou Blitz. With your host, Bob Rose.
Good evening, New Orleans Saints fans, NFL fans, and fans of the Bayou Blitz. We welcome you to another edition of the Bayou Blitz, and thank you, as always, for inviting us into your homes and over your radio waves on another Wednesday night. I hope everybody is doing spectacular. I am joined, as always, by my friend, my mentor, and my partner in crime, Mr. Kyle Mosley. How are you tonight, Kyle?
Doing well, sir. How are you and the family?
Me and family are good. We can't believe it's August 1st already, which means older kids are starting to gear up to go back to school. That part's depressing. Yeah. But if you take a whiff in the air, what do we smell? We smell football.
Football. Yes, sir. Football is there. It's here. No, it's not there. It's here, man. It's here. The guys are in black and gold. They're revving it up. Defense is putting it to the offense, though, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But, man, Bob, I am so happy football is back.
Oh, I know, and and I know you get them, too. There's a lot of talk back and forth on Saints social media, Facebook, Twitter, and whatnot, asking if we're excited for the start of the football season, and I respond the same way. I said, hey, football season is here. The games might not count. The preseason games haven't even started, but the games might not count. But those shoulder pads are on. The helmets are over the head, and those guys are hitting for real and fighting for a job. It's back.
Yeah, it's back in full effect. You have Coach Payton and those guys putting together a pretty good squad. You got to feel good also about the Saints because we have 21 out of 22 starters returning. We have some guys who are still not as healthy as we would like them to be, but we still have some good depth that we have in some critical spots that has been lacking over the past few years.
Yeah, we really do. And we've talked about it a number of times between each other and certainly on this show, that this might be the deepest Saints team on both offense and defense that we've seen perhaps even since the 2009 championship team. There's been the team was off yesterday and weather chased them inside today, but they're coming up on the first week of training camp practices, and everybody that has observed the practices all come away with the same takes, that for the most part, that the defense is dominating the offense. The offensive players and your superstars are still making some plays, but at the end of the practices, most everybody is saying that the defense has gotten the better of one of the better offenses in the league. And, Kyle, that has to bring a smile to your face. We saw a lot of improvements on the Saints defensively last year, and it looks like that this team is going to ramp it up another notch on that side of the ball and maybe even give us a top 5 defense in New Orleans again.
Yeah, definitely. And if you have guys who are vying for different spots, and you still have some spots on the defense which you can say is up in the air, especially like at safety, and you don't really know who's going to be a part of that main rotation, right? We know Marcus Williams definitely will be, but you still have Von Bell battling Kurt Coleman. That's a really good battle to see. Kurt Coleman's bringing some of his experience from the Carolina Panthers to the New Orleans Saints. He is one of those Ohio State guys, and Ohio State, they're buzzing right now. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But think about some of the things that's going on. You have Amunada, who is doing a great job pushing Sheldon Rankins, and you have Sheldon Rankins, which in his third season, we're going to see if he's living up to the billing as the number 1 draft pick from a few seasons ago. But also, man, you've got to like what's happening with Okafor coming and returning such in a short time frame from that Achilles injury, man. And I know they are being smart, and you heard Sean Payton in the interview saying that They are watching his count and being smart and making sure he's healing appropriately and not putting too much pressure on his body. But it's great to see him making an impact on that team, especially the defense. And DeMario Davis, wow, Bob, I think we got another winner there, just like Jonathan Vilma.
Oh, yeah, and you and I have both said it a number of times. DeMario Davis was such an exciting free agent signing, a little bit under the radar as far as name recognition goes in the general public. But I promise you, everybody throughout the league would value a guy like DeMario Davis on their defense, and he instantly upgraded an already improved Saints linebacking core, and he could very well be the piece that turns the linebacking unit into what has been a weakness the last handful of seasons into yet another team strength. And Okafor coming back, the guy was playing the best ball of his career before he went down with that Achilles injury, which usually takes, on average, a professional athlete anyway, at least 1 year to get back to full speed, and he's months ahead of schedule. I agree with what Sean Payton is doing. You're kind of wanting to bring him along slowly, and you do have depth at the position. Not only your number one draft choice, Marcus Davenport, who's going to be expected to take on the role of at least a pass rushing presence right away and pass rush downs, at least while he gets his feet wet to the normal nuances of every down play in the NFL. But you also have Trey Hendrickson, George Johnson. We're looking for a big season from Muhammad. So it's wise to bring Okafor along slowly. And you mentioned the secondary. The safety spots are certainly up for grabs. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with them throughout the preseason. But we also have talked many times about the depth at the cornerback position. And obviously our special guest who will be joining us as soon as team meetings wrap up this evening, Linden Stephens, is very much in the mix for one of those cornerback spots, and he'll be able to shed a little bit of light on what the Saints defense has been able to do to sort of stymie a high-powered New Orleans offense. But offensively, the team has made some moves in the last couple of days out of necessity, really, at wide receiver. The first casualty, really, of training camp was young second-year wideout Trevin Durrell going down with a broken arm. I expect that the team will probably put him on injured reserve, sort of redshirting him for the year, but he was showing some promise, so it's a shame that young man got injured, and we certainly wish him a fast and speedy recovery. And then the team just announced today that they waived undrafted rookie receivers Eldridge Massington and Josh Smith. They waived them with an injury designation. And then, of course, yesterday's news that they signed two veteran wide receivers, Malcolm Floyd, a former number one draft choice, who has had some problems the last couple of years in the league, but still has good NFL receiving ability, and Brandon Tate, who is better known for a kick returner, and we'll get into that in a minute. But what do you think of those two signings, Kyle?
Well, Floyd is a veteran, right? And he's a good receiver from everything I've noticed from his career. Tate, I think, has probably a better chance at making the team. And we only say this because of some of the challenges that we've had early on in camp with our returners. Boston Scott was one of the gentlemen that we believe could have made a really good push. You have Ginn, of course, who's a mainstay, but he had some trouble last season, especially in training camp and going into the season. So we really didn't have a guy that came into camp as the number one primary kick returner and punt returner that's going to always be there. Of course, you saw what Kamara was able to do against Tampa Bay last year when he returned the kickoff I think it was a record for Saints kickoff return, right? So
yes,
that's good to have, but do we want to have one of our star running backs always on the kickoff return team. And there's some changes to the kickoff structure this year as well, how the NFL has implemented the new system, having more of an even type of distribution on both sides of the ball and making it a little bit more safer. But they project it's going to be a little bit more exciting as well for fans to be able to watch. So we shall see exactly how all of this is going to play out. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody else comes out on the market or becomes available pretty soon. If Tate, especially going into next week, next Thursday, I think we play the Jaguars in Jacksonville. So if those guys don't show any promise before then, Sean Payton, look, don't be surprised if we see him bring in another guy as soon as possible. And look, man, one thing that has gone under the radar too, and Barry wrote about this, Barry Hurstis, is the fact that Lutz is kicking the ball. He's our main go-to guy, and I don't believe anybody's going to supplant him, but no one has come in as a place kicker to even challenge him, and he's been not as accurate early on in camp. Also, the long snapper has had some troubles from time to time, and we can't have that. So you got to have a really solid guy at long snapping. So are we going to see some changes on special teams? There's a possibility. I think special teams is a situation where it's always evolving. So let's see how everything translates out in the first week going into the game against the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, no question. And we've certainly seen from Coach Payton in the past, he is not hesitant at all to pull the trigger and make a major move at any level of the special teams if he doesn't feel comfortable with it. Am I overly concerned about the long snapping problems that they've had in practices, or even Lutz's, we'll just call it politely, inconsistencies so far in practice? Yeah, they could be a problem. I mean, we saw from this New Orleans team that they lost 3 games as a direct result of place-kicking miscues in 2016. And one single play directly cost them 3 games, and as a result, a playoff spot. So I think every single person on that roster that was on the team that year, and certainly the coaching staff, is mindful of how important the special teams are. I agree with you, Kyle. I don't really see any reason for major concern until he starts shanking them or they start muffing snaps. Once you get into the preseason games themselves, once you get into more game-type competition, and if those miscues continue, then we might see Coach make a move. But I also agree with you that the return game is a much bigger issue right now. And we've talked about it certainly many times before, and even last season. If you go down the Saints roster, there's not a lot of areas, when the team is healthy, there's not a lot of areas that you can say, yeah, that's a weak point compared to the rest of the teams in the NFL. A kick returner is certainly one of those areas. And they didn't get it done last year, with the exception of when they inserted Alvin Kamara as the kickoff returner down the stretch of last season. But also in agreement with you, you don't want to have one of your primary offensive weapons, one of the best offensive weapons in the league. You don't want to have him back returning every kickoff. Big situations, big games, yeah, perhaps. But you want to have a regular go-to guy that you're confident will at least be able to set your team up in reasonable field position, even if they aren't a game-breaking returner. At least realize you're going to get the league average in returns. And the Saints returners, Tommy Lee Lewis and Ted Ginn Jr. Specifically, they were not able to get that done last year. And Coach addressed that in his press conference. I don't remember whether it was yesterday or the day before. He actually compared the kickoff return units to an episode of The Bachelor, where you have your contestants line up, and if you don't like anybody that's there, you'll bring in somebody else.
Where the rose? We got to get a rose. Look, man, that was funny, man. Look, And Bob, think about this. These guys have such a great opportunity. I don't know what it is about that kickoff, especially the punt return situation, because the punt return, you're under a lot of pressure. You've got to catch the ball, know where the ball is coming to you, got to catch it, got to realize if you have ability to be able to run, make a move, whatever. So it's a lot of instincts that goes through it, the mind, but it also, you have to be mentally settled in taking that role, man. So it's a difficult position to play, and you really are on an island when it comes to that, man. So I don't know, man. We haven't really had a strong punt returner since, I know Reggie Bush was pretty good. Sometimes he would muff punts. I don't know. When have Lance Moore did a pretty decent job from time to time, but he wasn't a breakaway type of guy. You know, Marcus Murphy had that potential. Remember?
Yeah.
They just weren't confident in his ability to hang on to the football. So we really do need to have somebody who has a solid presence to be able to do it. I know one guy who can do it.
And who would that be?
My cousin Shane Boyle.
I can picture Shane. I can picture Shane on the punt return units.
That was his specialty, man.
Well, we had him. We had him on your show, the Crescent City Connection, last year, and we were hoping our outreach would be enough for the Saints coaching staff to give Shane a call. Apparently, it didn't work last year. Well, you know, Coach Payton, if your 12 contestants of the Bachelor kickoff returner don't work out in that first game against Jacksonville, both Mr. Mosley and myself, we would happily give you a way to get a hold of Shane Boyle and bring him in.
Yeah, well, I was telling Shane he needs to just go down to Veterans Highway and put that sign out, ask Peyton for a chance to come on in for a tryout, man. But the kid is still electrifying. He's done a great thing in the Arena Football League, but it's up to him. He's going to have to make that move. I told him what to do. It's up to him now. But think about this, man. Coach Rick Gailey used to always say, if we can get an extra at just 5 to 7 yards offensively from that kicking game, that could help with lessening at least 1.5 possessions for the offense. Just that little extra bit, you know. So if we can have somebody who's solid back there, and I know Mike Westhoff has done a tremendous job from coming out of retirement and helping our special teams guys, I think let's just see. We still have time. We have, 4 more games in preseason that they can be able to evaluate someone. So let's see if we can be able to get the guy that's going to be our mainstay to help us out.
Yeah, because that's going to be one of the things that I pay closest attention to during these preseason games, because again, you know, we know what this team has on their starting units, especially because, like you alluded to, Kyle, they only lost Vaccaro as far as that single defensive starter, and all of their offensive starters are returning. And you added a couple of exciting pieces in the off season as well. A couple guys are returning from injury, like Okafor, Alex Anzalone, people like that. So we know what the starting 11 on each side of the ball is capable of. They're capable of an 11-5 division championship season and a serious run to the Super Bowl. What we wanted to see our Saints do this offseason was kind of shore up those holes in the team. We think that they took care of that at tight end with the bringing back of Benjamin Watson, where it at least allows them a little bit more stability and a little bit more versatility from the starting tight end. We think that they did that by adding depth in the secondary with a couple of draft choices. Given our friend Linden Stephens, is certainly going to be in the mix. We talked about Demario Davis adding speed and aggressiveness to the linebacking unit, another pass rusher on the edge with Davenport. And then, offensively, as long as you have Mr. Breeze, you're going to be in contention for anything. And Kamara and Michael Thomas, another year together. We know what these guys can do. So, Saints fans, don't be discouraged, if especially in these first few preseason games. We heard some grumblings last year, why is only Drew only playing one series, or why are the starters coming out after one series, or maybe not even suiting up at all? Well, again, just like we mentioned, that's because we know what they can do. This team has the potential to be extremely deep, but the coaching staff is going to have some big, very, very important and tough decisions to make, and that's why I'm going to be watching these games well into the third quarter and the second half.
Look, I don't know, man. Playing Jacksonville in Jacksonville, first game of the preseason. Drew Brees, please just hand the ball off for the first series. That's all I'm thinking about. Those guys call themselves Saxonville, but just hand the ball off. And a lot of people say, well, you don't have to be safe with Drew and all this other stuff. Yeah. What do we need to see from Drew? We don't really need to see Drew. I don't really care to see Drew in preseason other than that last game, man. So I don't know, man. I would just hand the ball off that first series. Oh, okay, we didn't pick up a first down. Oh, Drew's gone for the night. That's okay with me. So I don't know. A lot of people may say otherwise, but man, I wouldn't put him out there. That's just me. So,
you're absolutely right. And again, this team does have a major question mark at the backup quarterback position. Now, we hope that whoever wins that number 2 job never sees the field during the 2018 regular and postseason. But nonetheless, you need to be comfortable with who that backup spot is going to be. You know what Drew Brees and that starting offensive unit is going to do. I'm not sure I would play Brees a single down, especially in the opening preseason game.
Exactly.
Because we've heard and read a lot of things from Taysom Hill, J.T. Barrett, and to even a lesser extent Tom Savage, that one of them would look pretty solid one day, but then absolutely horrible the next. Now Barrett and Hill, you kind of expect that out of young guys. Savage, inconsistency is one of his main difficulties since he's been in the league. So these guys, one of these 3 guys have to be given the opportunity to step up, and then when they're given that opportunity, reach out and grab it. And it's important to see consistency out of the practices, of course, but once those games actually start, even though it's just preseason, you're still looking at very specific things. If your quarterback can run an offense against an NFL caliber defense effectively and that kind of thing. And none of those 3 guys have been able to answer that question so far. So in those first 2, couple of preseason games in particular, I would give them the ball and just have Drew and probably even Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara. If they play at all, it would only be a couple of plays.
Yeah. I don't think you need to prove anything against Jacksonville right now. I think the offensive and defensive lines, I would like to see more from them than anything else. I'd like to see the linebackers are out there, of course, but I don't need to see the star players doing anything. I'll be honest with you, man, especially against Jacksonville. Ramsey, I was looking at some takes on him earlier today on NFL Live, and he still has a beef with everybody. He thinks he's the best cornerback in the whole league, and he plays very, very well. So you can't take that away from he as well as AJ Bouye. They have a pretty good tandem, but we have a pretty good tandem as well with Lattimore and Crawley. And you add Patrick Robinson to the mix. I'd like to see what these guys are able to do against that Jacksonville offense. And, hey, man, this could be a preview of the Super Bowl. We just don't know. But I don't care if Breeze is not out there to be in that preview. That's all I'm saying. So, but, the Saints are going to take care of what they're going to take care of.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And Jacksonville is on the short list of AFC contenders for the Super Bowl. Remember, they played they made it all the way to the AFC Championship game last year, and they played New England extremely tough in New England, which most teams don't do, particularly in the playoffs against during the Bill Belichick era. And Jacksonville, if they don't have the best defense in the league, it is certainly one of the top 2 or 3. So, yeah, it is, from a matchup perspective, it is awfully tempting and an extremely juicy matchup to see what Michael Thomas can do against particularly Jalen Ramsey and, like you said, A.J. Bowie on the other side. I know during the Saints practices, Thomas has made Lattimore and Crawley look ridiculous at times, and that just shows you how good a receiver Thomas is. But again, as tempting as that matchup is, as pay-per-view worthy as it is, it doesn't count. And all it takes is for your guy to make one wrong cut, and all of a sudden you're down one of the best receivers in the NFL.
Yeah.
And that's the number one thing I worry about when I watch New Orleans play. Every single year I've ever watched them play, the number one thing I worry about is I'm watching the starters and the regulars play through the first half is don't get hurt, don't get hurt, don't get hurt. The established guys, like you said, Kyle, the established guys, I don't care if Drew plays 3 series and goes 0 for 8 with an interception or anything ugly like that. I know what he's going to do when the games count. I just keep my fingers crossed and hold my breath if nobody of significance goes down with an injury, and certainly not a serious injury.
Yeah. Look, guys, it's practice still. It's an exhibition practice. That's how I look at these preseason games, especially the first 3. Keeping him safe is a priority, in my opinion. Those other guys need the reps, and I know going into the season you want to see your quarterback have the timing that's necessary with the receiving core, especially. That's going to be important. So you're going to see a little bit more of that 3rd game and 4th game of Drew Brees. Why the 1st and 2nd? It's not necessary, in my opinion. Going home for that 2nd one, of course, the fans are going to want to see Drew, right? We are going to want to see Mr. Brees pass and throw a touchdown or do something productive so we can breathe a little bit more easier. Then we can go back and watch all the NFL Today shows and NFL Network shows and read SaintsNewsNetwork.com as well as read Canal Street Chronicles. Then it'll be all la 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 until next week. So, but anyway, let's be for real, man. Let's be for real. We don't need to see Drew. And I need to ask you your opinion about Michael Thomas, man. Is it me, or does he just look bigger and stronger this year?
No, it's not just you. The young man is a tremendous physical specimen to begin with. He has since he came into the league 2 years ago. He takes his craft extremely seriously. He's a workout fiend from everything that you see and hear. But more so than that, I'm going to focus on the mental part of the game. He works hard to be physically superior, try to be physically superior against anybody he goes up against. But it is obvious when you watch him play that he works extremely closely with his quarterback, and he studies film like crazy because he is such a naturally sharp and precise route runner. He's not the fastest guy on the field, not even close to it. Now, his game speed is underrated, if you ask me, but he's not going to be one of those guys that are going to be considered tops in the league in the 40-meter dash or anything like that. He beats guys on precision and strength. There's no corner in the league, in my opinion, that's going to be able to physically match up to him, like you sort of alluded to. And then when you add in that he works so hard at what he does, he wants to be the best receiver, and he works to be that. As a result, his routes are so crisp and precise that will automatically gain him a step to a step and a half over most defensive backs, because the receiver always has the advantage anyway. Any defensive back will tell you that, because they know where they're going, and you don't know where they're going if you're playing defensive back against them.
Right.
But when Thomas is so sharp and he's not rounding off his routes or anything like that, he's not giving the cornerback or the opposing safety an opportunity to jump his route, because we know that Michael plays with one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the history of the NFL. So that ball is going to be on target. And since that ball is always on target, with Thomas running as precise as he does, it's boom, boom, first down, boom, boom, first down, et cetera, all the way down the field. And I mean, he can make and has made mincemeat of a lot of secondaries. I mean, he made in 3 matchups with the Carolina Panthers last year. He made their secondary his own personal playground, and it's such a pretty thing to watch him play. Because again, the guy takes the man takes his craft so seriously, and he's such a young player too. It's easy to forget that when you're watching him on the practice field now, he's only coming into his 3rd year.
Exactly.
That's usually right, and that's usually when a receiver really starts to understand the nuances of the NFL game and of NFL coverages. And this guy is already ahead of the curve that way. The sky's the limit for him, if you ask me.
Yeah, and that's why if you look at his body strength, and before, I remember his rookie season, sometimes his pants was falling off, right? So if you look at his body now, he's gotten a little bit thicker in the waist and hips and in his legs. So that's going to add more power, right? More strength. And the way he is able to shoo off the defenders, like you said, is the key. Now remember, Jerry Rice was not the fastest. Terrell Owens was not the fastest. Not even Randy Moss. Early on Randy was, but he just used his length, to be able to create plays a lot of times. Michael Thomas, if he stays true and does what he needs to do, like you were saying, just being a smart player, conscientious to the game, take care of your body, focus on how you're able to use your mind against the defenders, man, he's going to be outstanding. I know Deuce Wyndham, Rev, had some good highlights of Michael Thomas, as well as Drew Brees on today on Twitter, guys. If you have a chance to go check that out, Rev has some pretty good breakdowns to show how Michael Thomas has really a great running, and his technique in running those routes is just awesome. So you need to take a look at that, educate yourself a little bit with Deuce's stuff. But anyway, I just think if we continue to have him under the tutelage of CJ as well, man, that wide receiving core is going to be phenomenal. Look at what we have. And we still have Brandon Coleman sitting out on the bench, and I'm really concerned about his roster spot right now because of his injury.
Yeah, and Barry Hurst has kind of alluded to that in one of his articles earlier this week about Brandon Coleman being on the physically unable to perform list, at least early on, and hasn't even had an opportunity to see the field yet. Basically what that's doing, we already know that Michael Thomas, Ted Ginn, Traquan Smith, and Cameron Meredith, they have those first 4 receiver slots sewn up. Thomas is going to be your number 1. Whoever comes 2, 3, and 4, that's going to be an interesting combination, but one to not really fret a lot over, because the Saints, like most NFL teams, they run so many multiple receiver packages. But the key is if your first 4 spots are already filled, that leaves 1, perhaps 2 spots on the regular 53-man roster at wide receiver. We already talked about the Saints bringing in veterans like Malcolm Floyd and Brandon Tate, and Tate, you may absolutely be right. If Tate can show that he can return kicks, that might sew him up a spot, and he's a bit of a deep threat himself. So Coleman, despite his experience in the league, Coleman is going to be a little bit behind the curve whenever he is able to take the field. And really, if you think about it, Brandon, the last 2 preseasons, he has not exactly shined brightly. In each of the last 2 years, a lot of people, myself included last year, had him among the final cuts. Now, as we know, he, of course, made the team, and he does give an important contribution to the offense. He's one of the best blocking wide receivers in the game. Drew has trust in Brandon in short yardage situations and near the end zone. But Brandon Coleman has never improved his route running significantly anyway. He shows potential, but he's rather inconsistent. He's not as physical as some would like, despite his 6'6" frame. He sort of gets pushed around, doesn't use his height like a basketball player would, for instance, on the football field. Jimmy Graham was an expert at that kind of thing, but we haven't seen that kind of thing from Brandon. So if someone else manages to step up, and we've talked about players like Austin Carr or Josh Huff or Keith Kirkwood, also bigger bodied guys that can get downfield fairly quickly. The same traits that you want Brandon Coleman to bring to your offense. If those guys step forward, I agree with you, Kyle. Brandon's roster spot is in a lot of jeopardy.
Yeah. I was a fan of his from the beginning. Coach and I used to kid, and Coach Rick Gale used to say, hey, look, the only way he's going to catch that ball if he's facing it, right? He can't turn around fast enough to catch a ball, but you saw the improvement that happened in his 3rd season, right? This league is about availability, and his availability right now is waning, and I don't know what's going to happen. I know that Coach still likes him, and he's done a great job as a blocker, but Traquan Smith, Bob, I think this kid is the real deal. I think this guy can do just as well blocking down the field as Brandon Coleman. What's your thoughts? What's your takeaway with the young, high-flying Mr. Traquan Smith thus far in the first week of the Saints training camp?
I've got to agree with you. Traquan has been a lot more physical than what I expected him to be. He does have a bigger physical frame, but he was mainly known at Central Florida for being a downfield threat. Although he can't, he was easily able to find the holes in zone coverage in college, and I think almost 70 or 75% of his catches went for first downs or touchdowns his senior year at Central Florida, which is extremely impressive at any level. But you do expect even the best performing rookie wide receivers, and we saw it out of Michael Thomas, to get off to a little bit of a slow start, because again, we've talked about it with Linden on the defensive side of the ball, how much of an adjustment is to the speed and the size of NFL players in NFL games. Well, receivers have to go through it too, and Smith, granted, again, this is only about a week into training camp, and the games haven't started yet, but he is more than holding his own against even the top cornerbacks that the Saints have, Lattimore, Crawley, Patrick Robinson, et cetera. He's making plays down the field. He's making plays in the middle of the field, which some had as a knock on him. that maybe that's where he wasn't physical enough. But he's showing pretty good precision in his routes. Again, many rookies struggle with that, at least initially. And you may be right, especially for a third-round draft choice. This kid might be the real deal. And, we talked a lot last year about, Michael Thomas not having any consistent complementary targets, to kind of shift opposing coverages away from him, other than when Kamara was coming out of the backfield. But Traquan Smith looks like he can do precisely that, and he has the speed and athletic ability to blow the top off of a defense, too, if they come up a little bit too tight.
Right. And everybody talks about one thing that is kind of missing in today's young players is humility. He's a very humble young guy. If you listen to the interviews that he's given thus far, you have to be impressed how he carries himself. You have to also be impressed how knowledgeable of the game he has thus far in his career. But also, I liked what he said when he went up for that play. I think it was the last play of the offensive possessions in either the third practice, and he came down with the ball, and the defense was saying, he came down, but he was out of bounds. Who ran down there to pump him up? Drew Brees. Drew Brees is like, that doesn't matter. You got it. And he said, man, when my quarterback, and I love what he said, when my quarterback can give me some props, right? That makes me feel good, right? And you've got to love that, man. And so guess who's going to really be keying in on this guy and really respecting his ability? Drew Brees, right? And that's what we need, because we're missing a guy like Snead, and we're missing the Lance Moore. So who's going to be that really steady, sure-handed person other than Michael Thomas and Ted Ginn that we're going to have? He may be that number 3 wide receiver that we need. We still have Michael Lee Thomas. He's vying for a spot. He's had some pretty good plays. So there's a lot of competition. Now, I like the depth, and I like the fact that we brought in 2 more veterans. It's just going to help with us. It's going to make it difficult selecting, of course, who's going to be on the final roster, but it also helps us have a little bit more confidence in the wide receiver core when it comes to who's going to fill the who's going to be on the field each week and in and out, so. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, we spoke about it a lot on your show last season, that the Saints struggles on third down and even at times in the red zone. Their third down offense was, I think, 17th in the league, which during Sean Payton's tenure in New Orleans, that was only the second time that they did not have a top 3 offense in terms of third down percentage. And last season's percentage was the lowest during the Sean Payton era. Yeah, but and Bob, much of the reason. I'm sorry. I hate to interrupt you, but think about this, man. A lot of times they weren't taking advantage of their personnel. If you have a 6'6" guy at wide receiver out there, and you need to pick up 2 or 3 yards, why are you throwing it to Tommy Lee? Or why are you throwing it to sometimes the personnel didn't fit the scheme, in my opinion. But that's just something we could talk about later. Go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's just like a negative flashback that came in my mind.
Oh, no, that's okay. And that was one of the precise directions where I was going with this. You would have your, for lack of a better term, smaller, or if you're a short guy like me, I prefer the term vertically challenged.
Yeah.
You would have your guy in the slot, such as a Lance Moore, or later on a Willie Snead. But when they were at their peak, both of those gentlemen, they were very sharp route runners, and they were quick and they could find the holes in the coverage. They could beat one-on-one coverage pretty quickly, or find the holes in zone coverage. But too often last season, we would not even see them attempt that with any of their other guys other than Michael Thomas. We would see the swing passes to Tommy Lee to see if he could use his speed and quickness in the open field. But when a player like Tommy Lee Lewis is on the field, it becomes fairly predictable what the offense is going to do if they do anything with him.
Right.
So that's why you wouldn't see that play work very often.
Yeah, and you bring in tall guys and lanky guys, guys who have length like Meredith, and you have Traquan now and Michael Thomas. And again, you have guys who are able to stretch the field. Ginn is going to be able to stretch the field, right? But you also have guys that could be able to put pressure on these DBs who usually come in at 5'9" and 5'10" and 5'11" against 6 foot, 6'2", 6'3" guys. So that helps in the long run. And plus, these guys are not slouches as far as creating the separation that's necessary. And that's the key, and I think that we could really take advantage of that length that these talented wide receivers we have now on the team, if they stay healthy, that's the key. They got to stay healthy, right? So,
sure. Well, yeah, and you hit the nail on the head. When you have bigger guys and those big guys have athleticism, for no pun intended, the sky's the limit at what you can do with them offensively. You have a quarterback like Drew who's extremely accurate to begin with, as we know. He can put the ball to a spot and let his guy go get it. And when you have a taller guy with leaping ability, as Michael Thomas and Traquan Smith and even Ted Ginn, who's a little bit shy of 6 feet, but has extremely good leaping ability, and also Cameron Meredith. Drew can put the ball at what they call a high point, especially against a shorter defensive back, and just let his guy go get it. And that not only gives you the advantage against the opposing coverage, but it gives you an extra. The defensive line and opposing pass rushers realize that they need to get to that quarterback. They need to get to Breeze at least 1 second faster, because he can take a step back and put the ball at a high point, especially in a short yardage or a goal line situation. It's next to impossible to get to Breeze in that sort of environment. And then when you factor in the offensive line that Drew has in front of him and the feel that Breeze just has for the pressure around him as well, that's a recipe for disaster, for any opposing defensive coordinator.
Right, definitely, man. It's a lot to really factor into the equation of how the team is going to continue the attack that we have. But one critical position on the field, like the tight end position you mentioned with Benjamin Watson, but you have 2 young guys who are also vying for a spot on the team in Yelder as well as Arnold. Any word about how they have been progressing thus far in camp?
From what I've been hearing, Yelder is impressing a lot of onlookers, particularly with his athleticism and his ability to get down the field. That shouldn't be extremely surprising, even though Dion Yelder is extremely inexperienced, even as a rookie. I mean, he only really had 1 season of production at Western Kentucky. His athleticism is unquestioned. The only question about him, and the major reason why he wasn't drafted, was again his extreme lack of experience, how his knowledge of the game of football in general, but especially the NFL game, how it would come along. But I'm hearing that he's picking things up well. Lord knows he has a terrific mentor and Ben Watson on the field, and a terrific position coach in Dan Campbell to help him along. Yelder is one of those guys that I'm very anxious to watch once these preseason games start. I want to see what he can do against opposing NFL defenses. Dan Arnold, on the other hand, is maybe a more interesting story. Arnold is a converted wide receiver. They're having him try to add on some extra weight. He has a bigger frame, which is why they're trying to have him add on some extra weight to possibly fill in at that tight end position, which we've talked about on here before. We like the talent that they brought back in Ben Watson, but we have been acknowledging that is still an area that's pretty thin depth-wise. So I think it's a smart move to try to make with Arnold because he would have had a tough time making this roster as a receiver. He has decent pass-catching skills. He's a hard worker, but I don't know that he has the athleticism or the flat-out hands and downfield route running ability that it would have taken to grab one of those final receiving spots that we've been talking about all evening. But since Dan is a good blocker, I think that's why that they're trying him out at tight end. And really, what's the harm in it? Especially these first couple preseason games, he's going to be given plenty of opportunity to show what he can do. Now, he might very well be deemed as a developmental prospect, and they may find a way to stash him on the practice squad. But who knows? I mean, all it takes is a couple practices and a game or two, for him to make some plays downfield, and for him to really seal off his inline blocking during the run, in the rushing attack. He does that. He starts to show that he can do that consistently. I can very easily see him grabbing onto one the number 2 or number 3 tight end spot.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we can develop Arnold if he's not quite ready. I'm interested to see how he progresses. I understand Josh Hill is having a pretty good camp thus far, so that's good to hear. I was concerned about him. So, and Human is back. He's off the PUP, and he's back, and he was active today in training camp, so that's good to have Human back as well. He's going to stay with the team. His ability to block and be that H-back from time to time is going to be critical for him being a part of the offensive scheme, Let's flip to the defensive side, man. Oh, well, let's stay on offense. Any word, what's happening with Pete? Man, and that's what's concerning me. I know Labrias has been there, and they brought in a new guard. How do you see Pete? What's happening with him?
I think that they plan on bringing Pete along pretty slowly. Everything that I have heard and everything that I have seen reported has Andrus Pete's rehab pretty much on schedule. And I haven't heard anything to indicate that he won't be ready for the season opener. That would certainly be great news. The downside is, that Andrus wouldn't get a lot of work during the preseason. But fortunately he has, 4 years in the Saints offense now. And he has definitely shown the ability to make quick adjustments. Because even though Pete was drafted as an offensive tackle, they've tried him. They've had him play left tackle. They've had him play right tackle. He's had to play both guard positions. It really wasn't until about a season and a half ago that they finally settled him into that left guard position, and he began to flourish. There were many times last year where he could have been considered the Saints' best offensive lineman. So it was a shame to see him go down with that broken leg. Now, fortunately, there wasn't any major ligament damage or, like Okafor returning from an Achilles tendon type of injury. So fortunately for Andrus, it wasn't that sort of injury. But as well as I do, Kyle, a serious or a complete bone break you can sometimes have setbacks. So I think the fact that they're bringing him along slowly, I don't think we should be concerned about that yet. I think that that's completely normal. I would be concerned if by preseason game number 3 or number 4, we still haven't seen Andrus Pete on the field at all. But up to this point, I wouldn't be overly concerned about it.
Yeah. A lot of weight on that bone. And
yeah,
you've got to take your time, and he's in a position where he's going to put a lot of pressure on that bone. So, yeah, I agree. Take your time. See how things are going to go for him in the long run. What about let's flip to the defensive side. And as far as the defensive line is concerned, we have Cam Jordan, of course. We have Marcus Davenport, the young man. He has been seeing his ups and downs of camp thus far. I read that he did not fully participate in today's session with an undisclosed ailment. How do you feel about what's going on with him? Is there any concern, any panic there? Do we think another 4 more weeks is going to really get him ready to kind of fill in as a pass rusher?
Well, as far as what you said about is there any panic within a portion of the New Orleans Saints fan base, yeah, I'll tell you that there's some panic there already. You kind of have the feel for it throughout the chat rooms and everything like that. Realistically, I don't think that there's any reason to panic at all. Remember, this guy is a rookie. He played, and it was a knock on him during the draft process that he didn't play the highest competition, the highest caliber of competition in college. Playing primarily in Conference USA and everything like that. So you would expect, just like with many positions, you would expect a rookie to have their ups and downs, particularly when you're just 1 week into camp. And I know that he has been inconsistent at times, and even getting, and I'm paraphrasing now, but even getting manhandled at times by the Saints offensive linemen during drills. But consider a couple things. Like we said, he's a rookie. There's going to be some speed bumps along the way, especially early on. The goal is that you try to level yourself out as the season goes along, and you're picking up different little things, not only from your own playing on the field, but from film study, from coaches, from talking to your team, veteran teammates along the line, like Sheldon Rankins and especially Cam Jordan. So you expect the inconsistencies to kind of level themselves out. That's A. B is he's going up in practice a lot of times against Ryan Ramczyk and Teron Armstead,
right?
As an edge rusher. Armstead and Ramczyk, they make a lot of guys look silly. They make veteran Pro Bowl caliber players, during the season look silly. So, there's nothing to necessarily be ashamed of yet. Much like we were talking about, the competition between Michael Thomas and versus a Marshawn Lattimore or a Ken Crawley. Those guys are superstars, and they're going to make each other better by their level of competition. Davenport can only get better by going up against the likes of Ramczyk and the likes of Teron Armstead, and even inside or double teams, Larry Warford and players like that. So Davenport is facing what can be considered the best of the best in practice. That's only going to make him better.
Right.
I'm glad you said Marcus Davenport to be the next Reggie White or to be the next J.J. Watt. Now he might very well turn out to be exactly that. But let's give the kid a break.
I'm glad you said that, Bob, because people keep forgetting Cam Jordan only had 1 sack his first season, guys. Mm-hmm. 1 sack, and look what he has done thus far. His next season he had 8, then he had 12.5, then he went down to 7.5, then 10 and 7.5, then last season 13, right? He should have had around 15 or 16. He missed a few sacks. He's good for doing, Cam is good for missing around 2 or 3 sacks a year. So I'm not too concerned about him. What I do like is the fact that when he was lined up next to, it wasn't Jordan, it was next to Okafor, and he put pressure on that guard, he was able to get inside, and his length disrupted the quarterback. That might be something we can see in the game, where he doesn't have to be the edge rusher. Put those big arms up against a tackle, or against a guard, and rush from the inside. Man, that could really be disruptive as well. So how you utilize the size and the talent, you can't coach size, right? And you can't coach speed. So if you can have that length and that speed putting pressure on somebody from the inside, I think that's great. That's great to have. So they're going to utilize him, and we still have an opportunity to see him develop. He has a whole season, Russ, to develop. So, guys, please do not get on the Crescent City Connection and want to jump because Marcus Davenport is not knocking Teron Armstead on his butt. We're talking about one of the best tackles in the league, as well as Ramczyk, right? So, I mean, come on. We got to give their props to, like you say, who he's going against day by day in practice.
Yeah, exactly. And, I mean, we talked about Davenport. We focused on Davenport a few weeks back when we were talking about, what realistically we can expect from him during the course of the year. And, Davenport might have spoiled some Saints fans because he performed extremely well during 2 days of OTAs, before suffering a minor injury to his, I believe it was his thumb or his hand. Since he came out of the gate pretty strongly, that amped up expectations that were already high for a number one draft choice that the Saints gave up so much to go get. The Saints aren't looking, I mentioned he may not be the next coming of J.J. Watt or Reggie White. The Saints don't need him to be this year. They have Cam Jordan. They have hopefully a good inside disruptive presence from Onyemata and from Sheldon Rankins. And if Alex Okafor returns to form or close to the form that he showed last year, Davenport is just an extra complementary piece. He doesn't, in my opinion, he's not going to have to be an every down disruptive force for the Saints defense to be more effective. Now, coming out of the gate, certainly during the preseason and to begin the regular season, again, don't be surprised if Davenport might only see the field in passing situations. The team can afford to bring him along slowly. Now, would we like him to come out of the gate on fire and to be an instant Pro Bowler from the time he steps onto the field when that first gun officially goes off? Yeah, of course. But like you said, Kyle, let's not get ready to jump a bridge. If he's not, they can afford him to bring him. They can afford to bring him along slowly, and play him on more specialized downs as he rounds into knowing how to play against opposing tackles, during different situations, because it's a lot of film study on the, we like to nickname them the big uglies up front, but it's a very cerebral game up there too. We talk about a lot of film study, the quarterbacks have to do, or the wide receivers or defensive backs and linebackers. Linemen have to do the same thing. Now, they aren't necessarily studying the grand scope that some of those other positions do, but they're certainly studying, in Davenport's case, opposing blocking schemes or his own team's blocking schemes or tendencies of this tackle that he's going up against, tendencies of quarterbacks to see if they're tipping off the play. It's a very cerebral game that moves at 100 miles an hour. So while nobody is going to deny his physical ability, sometimes the saying paralysis by analysis kind of takes over too, because you have so much going on in your brain that you have to process at a high speed and instantly on the football field, that sometimes it does take a little bit of time to do it. That's not a knock on Davenport or anybody else. that's just naturally the game of football.
Right. Look, you mentioned J.J. Watt, and I told you guys about Cameron Jordan his first year. J.J. Watt only had 7 sacks his first year. And I remember so accurately here in the Houston area, those people were getting tense because he didn't have a whole lot of sacks those first few games. So give him time, let him develop. We still have a great defensive squad. He's going to be a contributor. Just be patient. Say some prayers, guys. Be patient. We're going to be okay. All right. And let's talk about, before we get off the air, man, just A.J. Klein and Anzalone, both of those guys returning from injuries. Any word on how they're progressing thus far?
I'm not hearing a lot, one way or another from A.J. Klein. You actually were hearing earlier in the summer, some mumblings, unsupported and certainly unconfirmed, but some mumblings that A.J. Klein might even be on the trading block. I don't know about you. I haven't heard anything concrete. I think those were just rumors flying around.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything at all.
Anzalone, on the other hand, he has had some good practices. And that's one of the guys that a lot of us expect to do great things this year. He flashed some nice potential last year, before he got hurt. But I'm hearing that he has had some nice practices. And one of the things to really watch out for with this linebacking core, we've talked about, the aggressiveness and the athleticism, with these players. But another key word that is going to be vital to the Saints this year, especially the Saints linebacking core, is versatility. Anzalone has played inside on a couple of practices. He's played at the will, the weak side outside linebacker, and I think he's even seen some snaps at the strong side outside linebacker. We know A.J. Klein can play either outside position or along the inside, and we know the same with Demario Davis. We have seen Craig Robertson has to play inside and both strong side and weak side spots. So the fact that all 4 of these guys, your 4 guys that you expect to get the primary snaps at linebacker, the fact that any of them could play any of those potential positions and cover downfield pretty effectively. A couple of them have shown strong capability to be devastating blitzers and play the run well. Versatility, in addition to the athleticism and aggressiveness, is going to be the name of the game. And you've got to believe that Saints linebacker coach Mike Nolan, in addition to defensive coordinator Dennis Allen, has got to love what they've seen out of their linebackers so far. And one of the reasons why we talked at the onset of the show that the defense has been getting the better of the offense in most of these practices, part of the reason why is the play of these individual linebackers and the group as a whole. They're flying around the field. They're making plays. They're shutting down those short and intermediate routes in the passing game to allow the guys in the secondary to make the plays down the field. It's a trickle-down effect because you already know that you have capable pass rushers up front. You already know that you have good, solid cover guys on the back end. The only thing missing was consistency and athletic ability from the linebacking core, and we're seeing it out of these guys. And part of the reason is their versatility and their ability to play so well against the run and the pass from either outside or inside positions.
Yeah, and you got to like the aggressive nature of the entire defensive core, because even when the guy gets the ball, they're swarming to the ball. They're trying to knock that ball out of the running back or wide receiver's hands. And even if one of the wide receivers or running backs going back to huddle and they have that ball, they're still trying to knock it out of their hands. So that's pretty good to see that type of attacking defensive mindset. And if you practice that way, you play that way. So it's good to see how these guys are doing. Now, one thing that really is something to take note of, and Bobby Hebert mentioned this earlier today, and I remember back in 2014 he was talking about this. When the defensive play is better than the offensive play in training camp, that doesn't mean the offense is not playing well. Okay, and it doesn't mean that we're going to have some concern for the offense. It just shows that the defense understands some of the schemes our offense will run, and they're familiar with it. So it doesn't mean that every week in and out you're going to see the same type of defense coming or offense coming at you. If you are the Saints defense, it's going to change, right, from club to club. But you've got to appreciate the fact that they are shutting down one of the elite quarterbacks from time to time and intercepting his balls and tipping his balls and frustrating him. So what's that going to do to the offense these next couple of weeks? That's going to make them get better. That's going to show them what they need to do to kind of strengthen some of their aspects and some of their schemes as well. So I think it's good all in all. And when our defense performs well, our offense is going to perform well as well.
Oh, there's no question about it. And I think it was Craig Robertson that said earlier this week, he was talking about how confident the defensive unit is as a whole. And he said it will be nice to win games because of the defense and not in spite of it this season.
Right.
And that's been their goal all along.
Right. That's a good way to put it, man. That's a really good way to put it. All right. I know we're coming down to wrapping up the show. Is there some breaking news out there that you would like to talk about, Mr. Rose?
Well, we talked about the wide receiver signings, and especially Brandon Tate, how he's going to factor in the kick return game. So keep your eye on that as practices move forward. I think they might have one more scheduled day off before their game against Jacksonville, which is a week from tomorrow. There's no major breaking news at this point. Fortunately, the team remains healthy, and we certainly pray for them to do so. And I did want to let our listeners know that I spoke briefly to Jim Everett and by text, and he said that his back surgery that he let us know about last week. He said that his back surgery was a successful procedure.
Awesome.
He's going to be back on his feet in no time.
Good.
And Jim, if you're listening, good health to you, continued good health to you, and definitely continue to rest up. And we loved having you on the show. I can't think of any other breaking news. It seems like the Saints have been in training camp more than a week, hasn't it?
Yeah, training camp and all these mini camps and OTAs. Everything's kind of been really quick, back to back to back to back. I know they had some time off and some break for themselves early part of the summer, but man, things are different these days, and you see a lot more coverage going on. We have some great coverage that you and your team over at the Canal Street Chronicles are putting out on a daily basis. I know we at Saints News Network with Barry and some of the young talented writers that we have aboard are putting out some pretty great content as well. The thing is, man, Bob, that we have to realize this has been 10 years since we saw a Super Bowl team. Can you believe that?
Time flies when you're 7-9.
Exactly. 10 years, man. And Drew is ready. I think coach is ready. The fans are ready. Everybody, this team is ready to prove them right? And I think that was the motto that coach used for the team, prove them right. So let's go ahead and prove them right and make sure that we do everything we can to cover our team and give you guys, as our fans, the best knowledge and insight that we will have for the New Orleans Saints. Bob, what's your thoughts about what's happening up in Ohio, man? That's your neck of the woods, man. What's going on? With Mr.
Ohio,
Bayou?
Western Pennsylvania. I've got the first of a couple weeks of vacation scattered. I got the first week starting next week, and I'm going to sneak over to Pittsburgh Steelers training camp for a day or two.
Oh, good.
And see what's up with the Saints opponents towards the end of this season. Actually, they play each other Christmas weekend. So I haven't decided how I'm going to cover that yet, but I'll certainly bring it up on a show here or there. Looking forward to seeing what the other team in black and gold will have to offer for the 2018 season. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that. As you mentioned, not only over at Saints News Network, but certainly at Canal Street Chronicles as well. We're going to try to cover not only training camp, but the New Orleans Saints team, upcoming season, and New Orleans Saints history in a variety of different angles. I'm working on a few different pieces myself, as I know some of those other writers at both networks are. So stay tuned for that. I know Linden Stephens was in a team meeting this evening and was hoping to make it out on time to join us. But by all means, Linden, and I think I speak for Kyle, team comes first. So you take care of what you need to do with them. Certainly hoping to have you back on the show at a later date, and hopefully as often as you'd like. We certainly enjoyed the experiences of having you on before, and we're very excited to see him on the football field too, as well as a lot of the other young talent that our Saints have to give. But yeah, I mean, down the stretch, we're a week and 1 day away from Saints football officially starting. A very special feeling, with this team. I think our veteran quarterback, our veteran head coach, they're rejuvenated, and certainly the fan base is rejuvenated. It's one of the most exciting times of the year. There's no snow up here yet on the ground. It's still good enough to go to the pool or take a trip to the beach. Yet at the same time, you get to flip on the TV or your radio and listen to or read about football. Life is pretty good.
Yeah. A lot of stuff is going down in the Who Dat Nation. I will be down there next week, but won't have a chance to go to camp, spending some time with my family next week. So we're going to be down in New Orleans. Hopefully I get a chance to run into Barry and some of the other people in the Saints News Radio crew. Also, man, we got to kind of what's your thoughts about this Ohio State situation?
I think it's going to get ugly. I do. You just got you got the feeling about that. For those that don't know, the head coach, Ohio State Buckeyes football head coach Urban Meyer, has been put on what they call administrative leave. I believe it's paid leave, but nonetheless, he will not be with the team, at least for the foreseeable future. And there's some ugly stories coming out of Buckeye Nation, about domestic abuse, along with other, potentially ugly accusations, and potential cover-ups. We could really see a situation at Ohio State where they have to clean house with the entire coaching program, and for folks that have read, if these accusations turn out to be true, and I'm not at liberty to get into any depth with them, of course, but some of them are out there to read. if these accusations turn out to be true, then these coaches, should be gone if they had a hand or played a part in it. Domestic abuse or abuse of any kind, there's no room for it in society at all, in my opinion, and particularly not so in collegiate sports. And when you're talking about coaches at a high school or college level in particular, you're talking about people, adults, and I use that term loosely with some people, but you're talking about adults that are put in a position to mentor young men and young women, and anybody that would engage in a cover-up of anything like that, you're abusing that power and abusing that responsibility. And anybody that has coached, youth sports or high school sports or really at any level, it's a role that I took very seriously and I took very personally. And I know we've had a number of guests on your show that I got to meet in the past, Kyle, Crescent City Connection, and yourself, that have held that same kind of role of responsibility. And I know it has to make you as angry as it does me.
Yes, concerning, man. It's a tough situation. I guess, and we could talk a little bit more about it. It's just tough. You see what happened with Joe Paterno. You see what happened to the coach in Colorado. Well, he maintained his job, matter of fact, but it's just tough all in all in today's society to cover things like that up. And anyway, it's just tough. But hey, man, I hope you have a good rest of your week. And Saints fans and Who-Dats, you can follow Bob how?
Well, you can follow me on Facebook or Twitter. On Facebook, I am Bob Rose. And on Twitter, I can be tracked down at Bobby R 2613. My pieces also run through the Canal Street Chronicles. Canal Street Chronicles is on Facebook and also on Twitter. Twitter handle is at Saints CSC. And my pieces can also be funneled through, or are also funneled through, the Saints News Network. And we work very closely with you and those writers over there. We're pretty much one big team. And I don't know if you saw, Kyle, and I'm putting my technical abilities to a serious challenge here. This past week, I started up a Bayou Blitz page on Facebook.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're not already a part of that, please hunt it down. Or if you can't find it, shoot me a message on Twitter or Facebook, and I'll get you set up. We're kind of planning to do what you used to do with the Crescent City Connection. Funnel all of our, streamline all of our shows, through there. As anybody that follows the Bayou Blitz knows, we're always available on Saints podcasts or through the Saints News Network or Spreaker app and even YouTube. We're just trying to give you not only one more avenue to listen to the show and replay of it, but both Kyle and myself, we want to give you guys the chance to input on our show, on your, this is your show as much as it is ours. So we want to hear, obviously we want to hear when we're doing well. But if you have any suggestions on, what you'd like us to cover, or angles that we maybe haven't approached yet, we want to give you one more avenue to do that. So please, reach out to either Kyle or myself through social media, or hunt down that Bayou Blitz page on Facebook, and let's get that up and running and strong.
Definitely. Check it out with Mr. Bob Rose. We're connected with him already, man, and I'm proud of you, proud of what you guys are doing, and our friends over at Canal Street Chronicles. Guys, don't forget, you can check everything out from Barry Hurstis, as well as our crew for the Saints News Network writers at www.saintsnewsnetwork.com. You can also check out all Saints News across the Who Dat Nation at www.saintsnews.net, as well as you can check us out on Facebook and on Instagram, and as well as Pinterest at Saints News. Bob, good show.
You too.
All right, buddy. Have a good one. Tell Lauren as well as Lil Guy, say hello. And guys, we may not be back next week because I have some prior engagement. But if we can you do a Tuesday show next week, Bob? We can possibly do that.
You know what? Let me reach out. I had a guest lined up. She actually joined us early in June. Amy Duplessis. We were going to bring her back next week. Amy, if you're listening, I'll shoot you a message when we get off of here to see if you're available on Tuesday. But yeah, we might be able to work out a Tuesday show for you, Kyle. I'll reach out to our friends over at Under the Dome because we don't want to step on any toes over there. Maybe do an earlier time slot.
Okay, we'll see. We'll play by
ear. If we can figure out how to get a show out for our listeners next week, by all means, I'm up for a Tuesday.
Okay, we'll check it out and try to give you a preview of the Saints-Jags first game of the preseason. All right, this is Kyle T. Mosley of the Saints News Radio Network with Mr. Bob Rose of the Bayou Blitz. Bob, hold it down. Have a good one up there, and we'll talk to you later.
You too. Thanks.
All right, buddy. Take care. Bye.
You too.